Hello, everybody, and welcome to the National Arts Club and our talk about our recent extensive facade renovation. I'm Steve Kass. I'm a longtime member of the club, chair of the House Committee for quite a while as well, and I'm here along with our team leaders to tell this story and answer any questions you may have at the end. First, I want to mention our House Committee, which is an excellent one. 3 of our members, including me, were former board members and governors of the National Arts Club. One is a current board member, one's a longtime member of the club, and renowned architect, and our general manager, Chris. 2 of my colleagues on this committee are former chairs of the committee. So the wealth of knowledge and experience is so valuable in this group that any topic before us is extremely well vetted, researched, and thought through. We're very fortunate to have that committee. This mansion building, comprised of adjacent townhouses at number 14 and number 15 Gramercy Park South, were built in 1845, making them 180 years old. And as many New Yorkers know full well, maintaining old buildings, especially in New York City, is very difficult, very complicated, and very expensive. While the House Committee's mission is broad, we spend most of our time and money on the maintenance of this structure. Priority projects are always for safety and long-term maintenance, structural, utility, and the like. Next comes improvements for our members, visitors, and guests. A number of years ago, the facade situation became apparent when worsening deterioration was noted by our architect and brought to the committee. The estimated cost, then in several millions, was so high that it couldn't be done through our normal budgeting process, so a larger plan was needed. Then, about 3 years ago, I became aware of the possibility of obtaining a grant from NYSCA. More about that later. So I wrote a grant proposal, which we so fortunately were awarded a few months later. In the meantime, we prepared a scope of work and a board presentation. Our grants were matching, so we had to prepare a 2-year budget to cover the other half of that. Our board realized the need for this extensive undertaking and commitment and approved the project. At this time, I'd like to formally thank the New York State Council on the Arts, that's NYSCA, and for an additional grant because we're on Gramercy Park, the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, without whose grants we could not have done this facade renewal. The combined grants provided us with the ability to move forward, and with this endeavor and the impetus to raise the additional funds required through donations and through assessing the membership. Thank you for all. As you may know, this club is a hybrid public-private club with both a private membership and open to the public year-round with over 150 programs per year and art galleries always presenting a wide variety of shows. Additionally, the club conducts community engagement and educational activities. New York State grants help support the public aspects of this, and we thank them. Once funded, we began to assemble our team and detail the scope. This took time to decide what we needed to do, decide how to do it, decide how to source materials, and of course, engage the legendary Landmarks Preservation Commission. Next, we had to write a request for proposal and find appropriate potential contractors who would invest the time and effort to respond to a complicated plan. They had to be firms who were experienced with historic preservation projects. Additionally, a very clear requirement of New York State grants of this type, capital grants, is that a preference be given to contractors who achieve a certain percentage of MWBE, Minority and Women-Owned Business Enterprise certification. The winner was Preserve, a trusted contractor who has worked for us in the past. Our talented team was assembled, and we kicked off the formal project in January 2024. I'll introduce our team members to you all at once with a few words, and then turn it over to them. There'll be time for questions when they're done. We'll start with David Scott Parker, a longtime member of the National Arts Club And by the way, I should mention, a couple of us are members of the club. Chris is a staff member of the club, and 2 others are people that we've engaged for this project who are not members of the club. David Scott Parker is a longtime member of the National Arts Club and owner of award-winning David Scott Parker Architects, who works for clients all over the U.S. and beyond. His help and advice on the House Committee, he's been on it for years, is invaluable, being a historian as well with a fount of knowledge about our structures. David and his firm have also designed and managed our recent interior projects in the lower galleries, in the entrance, and this grand gallery renovation a few years back. He'll talk about the Tilden Mansion facade history and its architectural significance. Barbara Ronska-Kusi is a senior architect and associate of Bone Levine Associates. She's designed and managed our recent exterior projects, which have been extensive as well, including re-roofing and parapets, reconditioning and repair. That's not only of these 2 buildings. We have a studio building that's 15 stories tall adjacent to this building. She's done that too. And Barbara will speak about the facade conditions, both from a standpoint of safety and aesthetics, and the architectural elements and materials. We'll move on to our contractor, Pete Rose, of Preserve Building and Restoration Management. Pete's the co-owner of Preserve, and they're a firm who's worked with us for many years too. They've done significant work for us in the past. It was and is very important to us. We're a New York City landmark, a national historic landmark, that we have a contractor who can meet the levels and quality of work that's appropriate for our buildings. Pete will speak about assembling the team, his teams and various teams that he had. The major elements of windows. Windows were a major portion of this restoration. Stone, we had lots of different kinds of stone on the facade, have to be authentic. Metalwork and specialists along the way, all integral to the successful execution of this restoration. And finally, Chris McAllister, our general manager, who many of you know, is our club's general manager. His work pervades the organization, and he's a very busy guy. Nonetheless, he has a very large role in this effort, the execution of it. Chris will talk about assuming the overall responsibility of the day-to-day operations, representing all of the National Arts Club's concerns of our members, tenants, guests. And finally, he'll say a few words about those artifacts you see in the rear when you came in, and the art that was created from the screen that was up in front of the building. Let's get started. David.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you for all for coming this evening. I had nothing to do with the restoration of the facade. I'm going to tell you background information. The Tilden Mansion is one of the finest examples of modern Gothic architecture in America. Designed by Calvert Vaux, co-creator of Central Park, and this building remains one of his most important structures. Best understood historically, architecturally, and symbolically relative to the people and events that preceded the erection of this facade. Its immediate neighbors to the east offer clues about the origins of this building. Here's an 1888 photo of the Players Club on the right. Notice the similarity of the upper level windows on it to the building immediately to its left. Both structures were originally designed by the preeminent American architect Alexander Jackson Davis. Davis, parenthetically, was the most important architect in America in the mid-19th century. There were actually 3 townhouses originally here, including what is now where we are currently sitting at 15 Gramercy Park South. These were the first residential Gothic Revival buildings in New York City and feature what is probably the earliest use of cast iron for porches in New York City. These insights and Alexander Jackson Davis's association with these buildings was not previously known. For a very specific reason. These buildings were built by a developer. People think developers are something of the 20th century. They actually existed in the 19th century. The developer was a man named Elihu Townsend, and like some other developers that you may have heard of, that explains why A.J. Davis never took credit for these buildings, because he was never paid. Does that strike a chord? These buildings are not in the list of A.J. Davis's buildings because he wasn't paid and he did not want to be credited with them because he was very bitter about that. In 1863, successful young attorney Samuel Tilden buys and renovates 14 Gramercy Park South, where we are currently. In the mid-1960s, removed the porches and altered the facade, including adding the bay. You can see on the right-hand elevation, the bay which currently exists today, the first floor of it, which is really quite fascinating. This elevation drawing not previously known either. That drawing is by the architect Griffith Thomas, who was the most prestigious society architect in New York City in the 1860s. He is known for his work in the French Second Empire style. He added the ballroom in the French Second Empire style. It is the space where we are sitting right now. And note the period photo. This space and the adjoining library, which is behind all of you, are extremely significant historically. Samuel Tilden, then governor, is shown in the right-hand view, receiving his nomination for the presidency in 1876. The left ballroom engraving shows him subsequently receiving word that his election victory was being contested. Tilden won the popular vote, but Southern Democrats who were unhappy about Reconstruction and blacks being given rights entered into a backroom deal to swing the Electoral College. Tilden, shown as a caricature on the left, remained holed up here at 15 Gramercy Park for over 6 months, but for the sake of the country, conceded. Here, in the left-hand view, we see the facade of this building in spotlight at that time. Tilden's beloved New Yorkers are serenading him after he stepped aside. This engraving done on October 27th, 1877. Tilden had recently purchased, but did not yet occupy, the townhouse seen to the right in this view. And on the right, you see the floor plan of the half of the building that we are in currently. This original floor plan, also not previously known, was done by Griffith Thomas as a measured drawing of this building when he was hired by Tilden. Tilden turned inward after his party turned away from him and focused on expanding his house and his book collection, the rationale for which only became apparent in retrospect after his death. Combining the two structures, two townhouses, into one was an interesting assignment, both internally and externally. Note the elevation drawing on the right by Calvert Vaux, done circa 1881. And here we have the great Calvert Vaux. Odd embellishments on the residential facade included busts of authors, seen in the middle, and two distinctly different separate entrances to the residence. The Four Seasons portal to his home on the left, and the faces on either side of the corbels are the Four Seasons. And so this was his doorway throughout the year, through the Four Seasons, to his home. And on the right, you see the Michelangelo doorway for visiting public who came to see him and to see his book collection. More about that. Upon Tilden's death, it was revealed that he had created this building and in fact made it fireproof by demolishing all the floors on the left-hand side to get rid of the wooden framing and to install fireproof vaults, because he intended for this to be a library for the people of New York. Tilden's munificent gift, however, was delayed, and the future of this intentionally constructed edifice were altered when his collateral descendants sued the estate. His generous gift had everything to do with creation of New York Public Library after 1895. And 10 years later, we at the National Arts Club were fortunate to acquire this amazing building as our home. Some facade alterations were made, including a less imposing main entrance and the introduction of a clear-story life-drawing loft, which now exists above the bay window on the left-hand side. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am Barbara Rąska-Kusy. I work with Bone Levin Architects. Our company was involved with this project for at least 11 years, as I recall. The first slide summarizes the major members of the project, exterior facade restoration project that just happened. So this was, of course, the National Arts Club, a house committee, and sub-consultants, the structural engineers, conservators. Of course, Preserve was a big part of that team, and under Preserve there were other subcontractors. That group was assembled later on. I am at the beginning of the presentation, so we'll get back to this. Thank you, Steve, for describing the process and all financing, and David for describing history. I am not going to talk about it because you described it already, except for to emphasize some of the points. So on the left-hand side, the facade right after completion, we know it was altered several times in the history. This is the comparison of how it was in 1884 versus 2014, when we were first brought to the project. We compared, of course, those two conditions, and we decided that we are not going to bring back any of the removed features because they were removed for the purpose. And they serve the functions of the club, and and they tell the story. So we didn't bring back some of the lower floors changes or the rooftop changes. Culver Vaux built it of 4 different stone types, predominant stone sourced in New Jersey, nearby Newark. That was a brown stone, which fills in the backgrounds of the flat facade. The red stone, Carlisle from Scotland, that was rare use of this stone in the city, was used on the window base and major ornamental systems such as horizontal ledges, arches above the windows, in general sculptural elements, and also scattered throughout. There were 2 other types of stones. One was gneiss, which is black stone, and it articulates this facade in a horizontal fashion, separates the bands of decorative systems, and small inclusions of red stone from Maine on a lower floor colonnettes. So yes, we were brought here first in 2014 for facade assessment, and at that time we observed that the facade suffered a significant damage and loss of stone surfaces and ability to keep water away from the building interiors. The interiors were leaking both through the walls and through the windows. We recommended to the club to undertake a comprehensive facade restoration project in phases to allow proper investigation from the scaffold and preparation of the program as well as fundraising. So in 2016, the scaffold was erected just for that reason, to assess the facade and conduct the make safe repairs by removing tons of stone and all their stucco repairs done in 1980s, 1990s. The worst floors were observed from the second to the top. The bottom two floors were renovated in around 2008 and were subject of only touch-up repairs in general. So yes, you can see that there was a moss growth, there was separating stucco from the walls, that there were details, those two arches, which you'll see more of this, completely washed out, and the column capitals cracked to the extent that it was unknown what was the detail sometimes. We summarize those surveys and observations and recommendations in the drawings. The one on the left shows in various colors level of deterioration of the stone, so the top of the building, the worst conditions. On the right, the bottom two floors, only smaller repairs. On the right hand, structural deficiencies. The parapet was leaning out and needed to be reconstructed last year. And top of the balconies also received the structural repairs. So with this on hand, we recommended a plan to collect the funds. Of course, the National Arts Club knew what kind of big task it is to collect that kind of funds to perform a comprehensive restoration program, actually. Took some years to get to the point that we could start. At around 2022, after the pandemic slowed down, we revisited the program. We worked very closely with the National Arts Club House, Steve Kass especially. We met several times to balance between the budget and the program. Steve described the bidding process and participants of funding, so I'm going to skip that. In 2024, a big day in February, the scaffold is up, beautiful with the decorative mesh to cover the construction activities with beautiful arches at the lower sidewalk bridge shed level. Everything is ready. The team of overviewing and actually doing repairs is assembled. Here we are enjoying the start with Steve and Chris on the picture, and Peter here, the construction, and off we go. However, before we started, we knew already we had a big challenge on our hands to find the appropriate stone to replace original. Original orange red stone on the left came originally from Scotland. We were lucky to find exact match from the same region in Scotland. It was shipped to New York, to United States coast, and then trucked from there to Wisconsin, to Quora Stone, who cut it, measured all details on the facade, scanned it in 3D, replicated those missing details in a meticulous way. Some of the examples of it you could see on that front table right there. So red stone was a challenge. Brown stone on the right was also a challenge because it's not available anymore. So we sourced it from Nova Scotia, very compatible kind of stone there. And these are first examples of what we had to do with those dilapidated details. So about 150 stones of smaller and larger size were replaced on the upper left hand before, and the stone ready to be set in place, in a place of damaged stone after removal of old stucco. Below, windowsill, beautifully sculpted. Sometimes the detail hardly remained, so from fragments of those preserved details, Quora and Bonlevin worked to interpret what was an initial intent. Sometimes we have to go to the sources. So about 150 stones removed, replaced. And then the bulk of the work after this was patching, repatching, removing old crumbling stone, patching of the flat areas and carved areas where they didn't have to be replaced. On the right-hand side, this is a combination of that new red stone above patched flat stones and some of the ornamentation, floral ornamentation on the left, and the column base. Then that's another example of one of our largest challenges, because the arches were completely washed out of the top picture, to the extent that we didn't know what was there originally. We found some archival photos and we recovered as much of various pieces of information to conclude that that was the summertime depiction on the top floors, and these floral motifs will be also from that season. The facade itself is a book to be yet deciphered. There is the whole progression of ornamentation. David mentioned 4 seasons. There are 4 seasons up there, indeed. From the bottom, the wintry and autumn, and etc. So those arches shown in a context of before and after restoration. I think that the difference is obvious here. One of the goals of our construction project was to bring back the subtle differences in colors between the stones, because this was intention of an architect to have this zone red and that brown, so it could be seen nicely when the morning light is here in the summer. Yes, it made a big difference. The railings were one of the big efforts as well. We sent them with help of Preserve to shop in New Jersey associated with Feminella, and they cleaned it completely. They polished it, slightly patinated here and there. We left it as is without any coatings, so it lends itself to the future cleaning and conservation and protection as needed. The windows. Windows represented probably 1/3 of the project finance, I think. And all windows were in extremely poor condition with rotten exterior trims, window sills, missing putty, broken glass, falling apart sashes. Our approach to this was that we tried not to remove any of the nice interior casings, as you see on the bottom picture, because to restore them would be really another task. So most of the removal and installation took place from the outside, but of course we had to be inside. So for that, Preserve installed room by room the curtains of other plastic closures. And I must thank you, Chris, here, because he coordinated all access and timing of that work. And That was really good cooperation. The windows are removed on this photo, exposed deep pockets with the window hardware. On the right side, one of preserves workers, Kurt, is demonstrating size of the window balances. Again, the pockets of the windows were filled in, insulated, waterproofed. In some cases, on the higher floors, we had to replace all of the window casing. That white casing was replaced completely in the ceiling. And complete installation. Just one remark here, the windows on the interior were left stained only to the color of original unpainted casings. And hopefully those casings will be brought up to that color one day, like those doors right behind us were. And it will be all in harmony. The window project is completed on this photo. Windows are to the modern standards and energy efficiency requirements. It's much better environment. The windows on the top of the facade, on that little inset, maybe you can see the ribbon window and the lower window made of iron. They were brought in later. All steel was corroded, all sheet metal was corroded, all window surrounds were not having any structural meaning anymore. So the whole opening had to be completely redone, new steel beams installed. That was a heroic effort, Pete, on your end. I always say that I couldn't believe how large the windows and beams were and how little space you had for that. And windows almost there, all interior room of that window was restored. The last piece, we once on upper left slide, the very edge, that part that arrows connects on the upper two slides, we discovered that there is a date there, 1882, but it was in quite pitiful condition. We restored that date and surrounding finial. The other side of this finial had stone which was completely damaged, so we had to replace the lower stone, and we used that opportunity and inserted the date of project completion. All surrounding stones were patched or replaced, and new fence was installed. More work is needed on the roof level. This will come in the future. We are confident that the whole building will be fantastic. Two pictures comparing the before and after. Our goals were achieved pretty much. We replaced crumbling original stones. We removed all stucco and repatched it or replaced with stone. Replaced all windows, refurbished all railings, cleaned the facade, brought back the colors of the facade. The windows helped to keep the building warm in the winter and chilled in the summer, so we are quite happy. The last slide, the lamp was also refurbished with the effort of the National Arts Club, and David, I believe, was part of that. And so that's the project done. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me as a guest. As a contractor, we're service entrance, basement, and roof people, so thank you, Steve, for letting me come through the front door this evening. My name's Pete Rose, and I'm one of the owners of Preserve. Truthfully, I'm only here because Steve said he wouldn't give us our final payment requisition unless I came and said a few nice things about him. So here we are. When Steve originally asked me to speak for a few minutes, my initial thought was that's not enough time for me to describe the torture that Steve and Barbara have put me through for the past several years. But for the purpose of this discussion, I'm kidding, of course, but in all seriousness, I will be forever grateful for the opportunity to be even a small part of the work that was performed here. Preserve has been in business for over 30 years, practicing facade restoration in New York City and surrounding metropolitan communities. Preserve got its start working on brownstones and townhouses, mostly for single-family owners, and those with passion for performing historical restoration on their buildings. In over 3 decades since then, we have grown into one of the leaders, that's mine, leaders, in historical restoration, working on parking garages, sidewalks, facades, and roofs, and as we say, complete building envelope restoration. We started working on this property back in 2019, taking over for the previous contractor on the restoration of the north facade of the high-rise building. We then moved on to the gallery roof replacement and facade restoration at the 19th Street building. We also performed the sidewalk vault replacement on 19th Street and some miscellaneous restoration on the 19th Street entrance and light wells. So we certainly have a history with the property and with the wonderful staff. Tip of the cap to the previous general manager, John Aramo and Stephen Acosta, without whom these projects could not have been completed so smoothly. Funny thing about restoration, as a contractor, we are a short-term inconvenience to tenants, residents, club members, and staff. But at the end of the day, a successful project to me results in those same people looking up at the facade after the scaffolding has been removed and saying, "What did we pay all that money for?" It looks like nothing's changed. I mention that only because we were brought in for the Gramercy Park facade restoration project. I truly felt that we would be able to make a tangible contribution that would allow club members and the community to see and appreciate the results of the hard work that was put in by the design team, specifically Barbara Cusi, and with the input from club representatives Steve Kass and Chris McAllister. I'm going to skip over the bidding part because I already talked about the torture. So once we were onboarded for the campaign, it came time to assemble our team. The project, as mentioned previously, consisted of a few main components: facade restoration, including cleaning, brownstone repair, brownstone replacement, waterproofing, window replacement, including the restoration of the interior finishes at those locations, and balcony railing restoration. I'm not going to put up any slides because I won't be able to do it more justice than Barbara did previously. My photos are mostly the same anyway, so you're just going to have to deal with me talking for a little bit more. With most facade restorations, access to the work area is critical for both the safety of the crew and the timely completion of the project. We engaged with Urban Umbrella to provide a tasteful sidewalk shed and a double bay pipe scaffold system that would allow for full and continuous access to every inch of the facade. We also contracted with Britain Inc. to provide a printed net which showcased the vision of Bo and Levine for what we knew would be more than a year of hiding the ongoing work. Window replacement is never easy, so my first phone call about that aspect of the work was to Frank Buscanera, owner of Then and Now Window Company, to bring in his expertise with landmarked window projects. He and his team of installers skillfully dismantled the old windows and installed the new LePage wood windows with custom casings and the spectacular Euroline steel window that you see at the top of the building. What may be the most underrated element of the restoration, but perhaps my favorite, is the restoration of the balconette railings. Barbara asked that we contact Feminel and Associates, who we have worked with on past projects with stained glass restoration and other high-end metal and glass work. Arthur Feminello Jr. brought an energy and commitment to what on the surface could be perceived as a small part of the project, but what I think is the icing on the cake. I urge you to look up one day when the sun is shining and admire the new forged castings and meticulous attention to detail that was put into the restoration of those decorative components that provide such character to this facade. Our visit to their fabrication facility in New Jersey emphasized the enthusiasm that Arthur and the team at Feminella bring to each of their projects. Perhaps the most difficult component to the work, and certainly the most researched, was the replacement of the natural brownstone elements. Preserve cannot take any credit for the research, which was done solely by Barbara and the folks at Bo and Levine. We will, however, take credit for dealing with the team at Quara Stone, who, after countless hours of back and forth, provided the ornate hand-carved designs that you see at the band courses and throughout the facade. Quara was able to source both types of brownstone, and their staff was able to provide hands-on scanning and measuring before completing the carvings at their Wisconsin location and shipping to New York for installation by our masons. Another hidden gem in the project, which Barbara had mentioned, is the brownstone carving of the date, of the completion of the restoration campaign, which lives on the roof and will be seen by only a lucky few. This was completed by a man that goes by a single name, Chen. You have to be a special kind of person to go by a single name. Chen is just that. When one of our team members described their visit to Chen's shop in Brooklyn to quality control the carving, he described a shadow emerging from a cloud of brown dust to reveal a masterpiece in hand-carved stone. With all of these experts in their respective crafts contributing to the collective goal of providing you, those that get to enjoy the club, with a project that you can enjoy and appreciate, I would be doing a disservice if I didn't mention my team at Preserve. Our project manager, Michael Trotter, our field supervisor, Carlos Carabajo, our assistant project manager, Daniel Chellemer, and our skilled field staff, including Kurt Roberts, our foreman, Masons Ramiro and Octavio Palomares, Aubrey Franklin, also known as GT, the man of 1,000 skills, Jose Gualpa, and the list goes on and on. Each of these individuals poured their heart and soul into this project. They utilized their impressive skills to recreate missing and deteriorated facade elements with composite patching mortar, as well as employing micro-pinning technology to preserve original, ornate floral features. I am so grateful to call them my colleagues, and that they worked so hard so that I didn't have to. I want to thank the folks at Then and Now Window Company, Feminel and Associates, Quarstone, and all of our local vendors, including Park Avenue Building Supply, VestaCast, JEG Karting, and CMF Tool, who provided the material that we hope will remain in the building for the next 100 years. Steve, please remember that as part of our contract, we provided a 5-year warranty, so I don't want to hear anything about that. Thank you for allowing Preserve and our partners to be part of this very special facade restoration campaign. Thank you.
Hey, everyone. Good evening. It is such a pleasure to welcome you again all here and to see a room full of people interested in Little Old Facade at the National Arts Club. It's a milestone moment in the life of the Samuel Tilden Mansion, and the project team is really excited to talk about it and share it, myself included in that. My name is Chris McAllister. I'm the general manager of the club, and I'm honored to share a few words tonight about what the project means to us as an organization, as a community, and as caretakers of what I believe is an extraordinary building. Much of the technical mastery and knowledge required for a project like this came from all of those who just spoke before me. Therefore, I will keep my remarks very brief. But tonight, it is a special honor for me to speak on behalf of our small but mighty organization and to celebrate what this restoration means for us, not just for the building, but for the spirit of our club. For those of you who have walked through these doors every day, like us, it's more than a building. It's more than just a historic site. It's part of who we are. It's part of our everyday. And seeing the facade renewed now, gleaming, again, it just reminds us how much care and coordination and commitment is required to preserve a living landmark. My role in restoration and this particular project centered around operational responsibility, as Steve alluded to earlier, sort of guiding the process here at the club while keeping the club's daily life running smoothly. It was a constant balance, I'll say, between progress and preservation, managing restoration schedules and deliveries and event calendars and weddings in between, and all the daily rhythms of our members and tenants and whose office is going to get moved over here while they have no windows in February. So I'm lucky I had a great team and great tenants too. Anyone who's worked on a landmark building or a building of any particular age knows or has probably experienced this, but there's always surprises that sort of lurk beneath the surface. What looks like a crack might reveal a century-old carving or a challenge that no one certainly expected. Those discoveries remind me that preservation isn't just maintenance. It's a dialogue with history, with our past. And having a team that could communicate and adapt and pivot was what kept this project on time, on track, on schedule. So really thankful for all of that. Every inch of the facade demanded precision, from the ornate metalwork that was just talked about on the balconies to the elaborate stone above our windows. The replacement stones came from quarries across 2 continents. I mean, matched for color and texture. That metalwork that was just spoken about, it was my favorite day of the whole project. We got to go to this really special place in like no man's land, New Jersey. And I'm from New Jersey, so I can say that. It was really unique. The metal work was done by specialists who taught us about the 2 metalsmith shops in New York City over 100 years ago that made all the original pieces. It was too much for one shop to make, and they kind of did them in different ways. They are all completely unique with almost invisible markings carved into each and every single piece that distinguished exactly where that bit of the railing, that finial, that rosette, or that bar fit into one another. It really was a puzzle, and all the pieces that looked the same did not fit the same way together. It had to be done very specifically. So coordinating all that with such a great team, but alongside club operations felt like kind of conducting a complicated orchestra where not every musician could see one another playing. But through it all, our goal was constant, and that was protecting the integrity of the building and its history, but also keeping it active and a welcoming home for the arts. Representing the club's interests meant balancing many of those voices from our members and our tenants, our contractors, our neighbors, and all those who helped fund and support the project. Every decision sort of came down to one guiding principle: honor the history while ensuring that the building remains vibrant and functional for another generation of artists to come and enjoy. It was truly what I think a community effort that was sort of built on patience and some shared pride I think we all took in it. At the heart of the National Arts Club, as mentioned, and if you don't know, I'm going to hammer it in a little bit more, but is our mission to support and celebrate artists. During the restoration project timeline, the NAC hosted more than 150 exhibitions and programs that serve our public mission of art education and the belief that art is for all. This building's facade, as very beautifully pictured and explained by those who spoke before me, is adorned with sculpted faces of great artists and thinkers, figures who symbolize creativity, intellect, civic virtue. All these people have shaped the world that we live in. And I think that restoring those faces while nurturing the next generation of artists inside the building connects our past to our purpose. It's a reminder that the arts are not static. They evolve, they inspire, they endure, and that this project helped guarantee that arts have a home in New York City now and in the future. The Artist Fellowship program that we have at the club is one of many ways that the NAC welcomes emerging creators to interact here at the club, to work, and exhibit within these walls, keeping our founding purpose alive in the most tangible way. During the restoration, the building, as mentioned, was wrapped in a protective canvas. Sometimes you see like the good scaffolding around the city. We wanted to make sure ours was the good kind. I think we all know what I mean there. So we had this great protective wrap, and it was a necessary covering that sort of soon became something more than that on our block. It was a symbol of transformation. After the work was completed, we invited our artist fellows to reimagine that same material in a project called The Canvas Reimagined. And each fellow received a section of that original facade wrap and turned it into a new work of art, exploring themes of preservation, transformation, and sustainability. We have almost a dozen artist fellows in our program this year. It's a rigorous program to become a part of, and we haven't gotten all of the art back, but a few of the pieces are on display near the entrance to this room. Some of those pieces, like I said, alongside them are fragments of stone and original casts and samples of the bronze work, all samples from the restoration itself and physical reminders of sort of how art and preservation continue to renew one another. So I think it's pretty cool to get up and close and look at some of those things, because from the sidewalk you can't really see what's up top. Anyway, preservation at its best, I think, is about giving history a future. And the Tilden Mansion now stands renewed and what I believe to be more elegant and stronger and ready for its next century. And every time I pass the facade, and hopefully when all of you walk past the facade, you're reminded that great art and great architecture and great communities all share one thing in common, and that is we are built to last. Just in closing, I want to say to our architects and our contractors and craftsmen, thank you for your artistry and precision. To Steve Kass, who led the club's committee for this project, to our members and tenants and neighbors, thank you for your patience and your guidance and your partnership. To the New York State Council on the Arts, we have a representative tonight, Lindsay Turley. Thank you so much for coming. So that's NYSCA, and to the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, all of our local partners and local officials, thank you to them as well for their extraordinary support. To our staff here at the club, I think their flexibility and creativity and love of this place made it all happen. So as general manager, it's been an honor to represent the NAC in this, and I was so delighted when I heard John Aramo, the former general manager, is here tonight as well, and he was part of the beginning of this and much of the upkeep and return to glory that this building has been going through over the last 10 years. But it's been an honor to represent the NAC and sort of see this mansion restored, and it reflects not only the history of this city, but the enduring, what I believe, creative spirit that continues to define the city. So I hope you'll all come back and visit us again soon, and maybe pay a little extra attention and extra second before you walk through those front doors and see all of the really cool things that were restored. So with that, I think any of us are happy to answer any questions, and I'll pass it back to Steve.
We have time for a couple of questions. Would you please take a seat over there, each of you? And does anybody have a question they'd like to start with?
So my question is, so what was the biggest surprise in all of this? What didn't you expect, and what does it mean?
There were surprises which were predicted, I would say. We knew we were going to see a lot of underlying conditions that would have to be repaired, but we didn't know exactly to the last detail what that would be. And one of the examples of it was, perhaps you remember, that steel window upstairs that was completely missing the supports effectively. So that was a big surprise.
Yeah, the joke was we're lucky like there wasn't a big gust of wind that took it out prior to. And I'll say a pleasant surprise was how well all of our tenants received the work, and how well our members were okay with us mitigating the effect it had on the member experience here as much as we could. And it didn't keep any person away from visiting our club for all of our public art programming. That was really important to us, and I was happy to see over the 18 months that the numbers for attendance at our public programs were just as high and in line with the numbers the year before, with no scaffolding. So that was a really pleasant surprise.
Yeah, the building is 180 years old, and when you opened up the plans and the engineers and architectural thinking of the 1880s, you had some unique insights into their thinking back then that most people don't get the chance to see. Are there any takeaways that you can share with us about that might be interesting, of their intellect, their knowledge, their lack of knowledge that now we have, or vice versa?
There were many details, stone details, that the back of those stones surprised us, and we expected straight lintel piece, and it wasn't straight. It was L-shaped with the leg hidden inside of the wood casing, things like that. That was actually a good discovery, because those lintels turned to be more sturdy and stronger and didn't have to be replaced. So secrets, I haven't discovered any other than that date on the left side of the building.
We may have buried more secrets than will be discovered.
I told you not to bring those up.
For me, it was interesting to see that the actual window interiors should be different color than black as they are now. That's
Yeah, to that, I would note, this building has seen so many changes over the years. And the facade, because usually facades on buildings are part and a parcel of the construction of the building. This was a complete refacing of the structure. And one of the things I didn't mention early on is that the original half, which we're in now, was probably the first Gothic Revival building in New York, first use of cast iron, but it was also one of the earliest brownstones in New York City, which is really quite fascinating if you think about it. And brownstone is by very nature not a stable, not a good building material, which they didn't know in the 19th century. And you know, the mid-19th century is called the Brown Decades, and it's because of brownstone. And the thing about brownstone is it's a sedimentary stone, unlike granite, for example, which is volcanic. And so granite is the heat that is like molten, whereas a sedimentary stone is layered, okay, over time. And the thing about brownstone is the way that the brownstone was quarried in period, if it was done quickly and inexpensively, they cut like this and they tilted the piece up. So think of the sedimentary layers. And so water gets between the layers, and then the particulates, I think it's mica, in between. When moisture gets in there, it expands and it causes the whole thing to bust apart. So one of the things about the facade that Barbara kind of spoke to was that it's made of several different stones which each take water differently, okay? And so this whole facade was applied to the building, and then there are the connectors that are attaching it because it's really not integral for the whole thing. And so fixing this kind of patchwork quilt that was later applied, this was not an easy thing to do. And, you know, applaud these people because this was really quite an impressive feat.
Yeah, we did a thorough investigation with the stone conservator regarding the stone, and he kind of guided us through it a little bit. Stone monument conservation, Ivan Major, that I didn't mention earlier. But yes, it's kind of well-known fact that those things happen with the sandstone, especially with the brownstone. Yeah.
I'll just mention one thing, you know, to your point about thinking about the 1880s when this was done. I think what was unique for me was the recognition that something so sophisticated, like this beautifully carved facade and the ornate balconies, has this air of simplicity to it. Like I mentioned, the literally 1, 2, 3, 4 line marks meant that this piece went to that piece, and the other one had 3 line marks, so the 3s went together. I think sometimes maybe we overcomplicate things in 2025, and they just used, you know, straight little lines to make sure they knew everything, where it went, how it connected to one another. And then in 2025, we had like the debacle of micro pinning. Won't get into it, but they got the micro pins were hard to find a few times, and they're like literally dental micro pins that you use to secure the original old stone, which I thought was really, really neat. So we got to think about someone in the 1880s and how they looked and carved it and said, wow, we don't want to change that. What do we have today that'll keep it like that? And, you know, dental pins, right? Pretty cool.
We have another question here.
Hey, I'm Patrick Ward. Thank you guys all for this presentation. It was really great to see. I was originally going to ask actually about the deterioration of the facade, but you kind of answered that in the last question. So I guess I'm also curious. I found it really fascinating to see how much of the arches were actually like kind of eroded away, and the process to replace those. Can you speak to that a little bit? I mean, obviously you talked about there was a process of scanning, and then those were worked through with the stone manufacturers to kind of reinterpret some of them. And I'm curious about, like, through that process, was there an effort to maybe save some of those? Instead, were the new stones, I don't know, put on top? Like, yeah, could you speak through
Yeah,
that?
so the general idea was save as much as you can. But with the horizontal projecting ledges, the story is more complicated because they serve as water shedding features, so water doesn't flow into the windows, into those sculptural elements. And unfortunately, those elements were the most deteriorated. And thankfully, those window hoods above those arched sculptural panels, they were fairly standardized as per original construction. So we could run long pieces without gigantic effort and replace them one by one. And if maybe you want to speak about technicalities of that.
Well, I think to try to answer the question, so those window hoods appear across the facade in a few different locations, and I think what Barbara and Steve and the team were able to do is to try to capture what those were originally, potentially what they could have originally been carved into, because there was so badly deteriorated that there was no evidence of what could have been there. So I think, Barbara, you did an excellent job of drawing on those other elements that did remain to catch the spirit of what was probably there originally.
First of all, thank you all. This is an amazing place, and we love coming here and just enjoying it. I have two questions. The first one's going to be very fast. Do we know why the original architect wasn't paid? It's kind of a funny question for an architect. And the second question, and this seems like the answer might be obvious, but maybe it's not. Why was the building allowed to deteriorate so badly for so long?
I can answer that. The club had for many years deferred maintenance, and it was a very expensive project, wouldn't fit into our annual budget, so they deferred the maintenance, as many buildings in New York and elsewhere will do. It's unfortunate, but so.
Purely money.
Purely money.
Also, also many repairs done in the 80s, 90s were done incorrectly. So not only they failed prematurely, but also they contributed to damage of the surrounding stones. I mean, those days, not everyone knew how to approach the repairs. Yeah.
The reason the original architect was not paid, architecture was a new profession in the United States in the 1840s. And Alexander Jackson Davis was the first professional architect in the United States of America. That sounds like an excuse, which is not really valid. What I can also mention is Gramercy Park, which we, love and admire, was built by a developer, Samuel Ruggles, who, by the way, in order to sell the lots around this place, engaged an architect named Alexander Jackson Davis to design model townhouses. And like Elihu Townsend, who built these three, he also did not pay Alexander Jackson Davis. And A.J. Davis's day books still exist in the collection of New York Historical Society. And it was in going through those day books that I found, because it wasn't known before, that he had not only designed these three buildings, but that he designed some of the buildings for Ruggles. And Davis was very kind of meticulous in keeping his account record, and he put down what he was charging, how many drawings he made, and then finally crossed through it and put no pay, 3 exclamation marks. See, he was not happy with either Samuel Ruggles or with Elihu Townsend. And so that's why Davis, who was a very important architect, never took credit for, he did do, by the way, a couple of other things here on Gramercy Park, which are in his list of works, but these things are not.
So for whatever reason, the developer just stiffed it, essentially.
Some developers do that.
Some?
Some.
Yes, okay, I just wanted to add on to one of the reasons why it took so long for the club to get this done. Back in the early 2000s, I was on the board for a number of years. And before I go back into there, I'll tell you that I want to thank Steve Kass, John McAllister, John Aramo, and their oversight and hiring of your teams to get this done, because you've simplified how complex this was for all of us tonight. And I know from leading large projects elsewhere, nothing to do with architecture, just how hard this was. But there were so many times in the past where previous boards, they didn't have a Steve Kass on the board, or a John McAllister on staff, or a John Aramo on staff. Every big project or good project needs a general. You guys were the ones who oversaw this, and I am eternally grateful, as are so many other members. We've all noticed and commented amongst ourselves how proud we are that this place looks so good. You guys all did that, so I just want to say thank you all, and I hope I didn't oversimplify why this wasn't done before, but it takes a while to get the right people in place so that progress can be made. And having all you three involved in this club at those times, that's how this got done. And that's why it's done now, and it's done with such quality and minimization of interruption to us club members, because I'm not very well known for like complimenting everybody for everything. So I just want to say thank you very much.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you for saying that, really.
Thank you all for coming. I just remembered something I forgot to mention. For the members of the club, this project, as originally scoped, came in on budget and in time. Thank you for coming. Good night.
Here, here. Thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah, may I say just I wanted to repeat, thank you, Mr. Kass, very much, so much. You were leading this project with such a rigor, and you kept the rhythm and tempo. That was fantastic.